welcome you here and serve what's going to be a very easy role as moderator, because I'm going to give as much time as possible to our wonderful panelists. We have 3 presentations happening today at this panel titled Queer Labor, Queer Art. And I'm going to introduce each of the presenters, and then they will speak. So our first speaker is Olga Kopenkina, a Belarus-born, New York-based independent curator and art critic. Of course, Olga has a much longer biography, which you can find online, and I encourage you to look at it there. So Olga, please join us at the podium.
Thank you for the presentation, and thank you for the invitation. Can you hear me well? No? Oh.
We'll turn it on.
Yep. Oh, okay. Can you hear me now? Okay, good. Today I will talk about exhibition, the work of Love, the Queer of Labor. I co-curated with artist Yevgeniy Fiks, who also is here today, and he will talk about his own works later in a separate presentation. The exhibition we curated was conceived with the goal to counter how mainstream institutions typically represent LGBTQ plus identity. For example, Whitney Biennial, which likes to praise itself for its inclusion of queer artists. In the current biennial, roughly 30% of exhibition artists are queer, but usually they traffic in images of classless, glamorous images or body fluidity, rendering working class queer experience and the broader entanglements of gender, sexuality, and labor invisible. The works we gathered for the show were sought to restore those connections, whether through historical recovery or speculative imagining, drawn from a range of geographical and political contexts. We did this exhibition twice, so there was 2 iterations of the show. One was in Franklin Street Works exhibition space that doesn't exist anymore, unfortunately. It was shut down during the COVID pandemic in Stamford, Connecticut. So it's important because then the Stamford would reappear in my presentation. And another iteration was in the Pratt Manhattan Gallery 4 years ago in 2022. So I will show the images from both, so I will just mix them up. I'm not going to specify which one was presented where. So because the second iteration was a little bit more expanded version of this exhibition. So the exhibition opens with historical attempts to envision queerness through the lens of class. Throughout the 1950s and 60s, the Matachin Society and Daughters of Bilitis, who self-identified as homophile, attempted to create homosexual visibility by linking identities of gay and lesbians to the middle-class positions. The cover of the October 1965 issue of the first nationally circulated lesbian magazine, The Ladder, a lesbian review, published by Daughters of Bilitis, depicted the picket for gay and lesbian rights staged in Washington, D.C. in front of a federal building. The participants appear as ordinary middle-class professionals wearing gender-appropriate clothes acceptable by bystanders. According to art historian Richard Mayers, the term homophile was created to diffuse the explicitly sexual force of homosexuality and thereby render it less troubling to the dominant culture. Following the Mayer's analysis, we juxtaposed this image to the well-known post-Stonewall poster come out made by Gay Liberation Front in 1970. Based on the photo of Peter Hujar, the poster enacts the defined identification as gay, as sexually and socially free, rather than simply as homosexual. The Gay Liberation Front's members, men and women, appear in a loosely horizontal arrangement, in street clothes with unkept hair and raised fists, a new egalitarian urban class refusing dominant power. Excuse me. On the contrary, a public art project by Dyke Action Machine, implemented by painter Carrie Moore and photographer Sue Schaffner on the streets of New York City between 1991 and 2008, used the language of the Second World War style patriotic postures, which often riffed on the image of workers and commercial advertisement. The mock advertisement American Lesbians Don't Sell Out attempted to draw public attention away from normalized representations of queer, focusing on social agency. The attempt to imagine queerness as a distinct class finds its expression in We Will Open a New Front, a video recorded performative lecture by Yes Association, which is a Swedish duo of artists Åsa Elzen and Malin Ornell, staged on multiple occasions, including at Moderna Museet in 2010. The work is delivered by an actor under the fictitious name Lee H. Jones, whose script weaves together quotations from queer and feminist intellectuals across different historical moments, voices that in Audre Lorde's phrase worked along the edge of each other's battles. Together they conjure a new queer class rising from politically marginalized identities, the leftovers, over the one that embraces difference across race, ethnicity, sexuality, gender, labor, lifestyle, and citizenship. I was thinking of running this video, or maybe if I have time, we can do it later in the end of this presentation, because it was quite central to the whole concept of the exhibition, framework of this exhibition. It's actually, okay, I'm gonna skip it for now and go forward. Yes Association's new spelling of a street, a tribute to Audre Lorde, recovers a crucial post-World War II moment when working class and queer identities were inseparable. The installation drew directly from her Lorde memoir, Zami, A New Spelling of My Name, in which factory labor and her first relationship with a female co-worker are intertwined. The installation included photographs of the former Keystone Electronics factory in Stamford, where Lorde worked in the 1950s, and where the exhibition took place. As a part of their participation, the artists initiated a petition to rename One Dog Street in Lorde's honor. So One Dog Street is where the Keystone Electronics was located. And they succeeded in collecting signatures through the town hall meetings and other events in the city with the help of the gallery director, Terry Smith, to whom we couldn't be more grateful. As I said, unfortunately, the gallery was shut down later. So the work invokes what John D'Emilio calls in his classical text affectionate communities, queer working class networks that capitalism paradoxically enabled by freeing workers from family ties and throwing them into bonds of mutual support, freely choosing. That vision persists today in the communities of LGBTQ+ artists who understand their practice as continuous with a proletariat life defined by both power and precariousness. In the line with Yes Association's works, the exhibition poses a pressing question: can queer love's stimulates new social organizations of bodies and generates sustainable forms of life. Zanelli Muholi's photographs address this with particular precision. They black and white self-portraits dance with references to domestic and industrial labor. Her mother was a domestic worker. So her self-portraits propose a mode of resistance to society that systematically targets both queer people and workers. One portrait that you see here, and we exhibited Tulani, Parktown, reaches directly into the 2012 Marikana massacre, when South African security forces killed 34 striking miners. This works gain further resonance when considered alongside Muholi's portrait of Cape Town's queer community. They were absent from this exhibition. We didn't include them, but it's also important to, I just want to give you a bigger picture of her work, which so the aesthetics of those portraits and these ones move fluidly between black and queer representational frameworks, together composing a vivid image of self-sustaining community holding its ground against multiple overlapping forms of oppression. The theme of queer intimacy under oppression finds an unlikely expression in Evening with Bros, a pornographic comic by Russian artist Hagra. Three delivery men while delivering the package to a client, catch a TV report about a gay pride parade in decadent Europe, narrated by Russia propaganda media. So their reaction is contemptuous. I have been wearing the same pair of pants for a month, and they want me to think someone's gay marriage is more important. Yet after work, over drinks, they end up in bed together, three of them. So the banal scene from the life of workers portrayed in these comics reflects the complexity of sexual life in Russia, where social acceptance of homosexuality is low. But it's also presented as a tool to restore social liaison, otherwise lost with the demise of the 20th century industrial capitalism and the lack of political and economic power of the working class after the collapse of socialism. In contrast to Hagra's piece, which depicts unrestrained and uncommodified sex of free workers, video The Fall of Communism as seen in gay pornography by American artist William Jones shows gay sex as commercialized and controlled by media and the sex industry. Based on footage from 1990s Eastern European gay pornography, in particular the film Young Russian Innocents that he used here, distributed in the United States, the work shows young men performing sexual acts on camera. The naked bodies intermingle with Soviet attributes such as military uniforms, red flags, and the portraits of Soviet leaders. The end of socialism and the beginning of capitalist privatization resulted in the production of native queer bodies for the demands of the international pornographic industry. Love and sexuality are alienated from the side of the enactment, and identity are placed within Western men's fantasies. In this sense, sex is not a life-enhancing activity, but an area of endless consumption. But when gay producers take control over expressions of sexuality, gay sex leaves the area of consumption and enters the cultural arena from where history is viewed. This is evident in Noam Gonig's film 1919 that undertakes a historical revision of the Winnipeg General Strike from 1919, the most famous and influential strike in the history of Canada. The film's action, which is fictitious, is staged in a Chinese gay barbershop and bathhouse, which during the strike was transformed from being a cruising site for gay men into a communist den. A brawl between police and strikers, which is viewed through the window of this bathhouse, happily ending with the signing of the final proclamation that grants the workers' rights by the city's mayor. The history in Gonik's video is imbued with a satirical vision where sex education, hygiene, and class struggle meet in collective joyful delirium. Two works in the exhibition reference the early avant-garde and communist projects of the 20th century, which tried to get away from the bourgeois notion of family and see today queer approaches to family as a viable alternative. One of them is Angela Beller's film Producing Comrades of the Future, Tretyakov's I Want a Baby, in which she discusses a play written by Sergei Tretyakov, a Russian artist and avant-garde artist and writer, in 1926 for the Moscow Meyerhold Theater, which was initially censored by the Soviet government. The play, in a semi-satirical way, entertained the alternative to heteronormative marriage and female reproduction in a classless society. While discussing this play, which was also a subject of the artist's dissertation, Bellers, who was pregnant with her child, addresses queer parenthood. Queer motherhood in her work is seen as an alternative to capitalist differentiation between heterosexuality and homosexuality that assigns the role of procreation strictly to heterosexual bodies. And another work in this line of works which deal with the ideas from avant-garde, right, trying to repurpose them. So it was German Lavrovsky's work Reborn, which situates the narrative of queer parenthood and collective kinship within the context of the digital revolution, with its limitless possibility for the evolution of species, class identities, and forms of commonality. At the center of the work is a childlike embryo rendered as a 3D printed sculpture, placed in the gallery space and made available for viewers to touch and handle. A shared tactile encounter that evokes the image of a child held in common within an expansive queer community. The piece draws on the experimental practices of collective child rearing and care outside of nuclear family network that briefly flourished in the revolutionary Russia during the early 20th century. There are more works in the show, including Yevgeniy Fiks' work dedicated to legendary figure Harry Hay, the American queer activist and communist who had a very interesting views on history, social organization, and queer community. We also exhibited some documents from his archive in this exhibition, but I will leave it for Yevgeniy. He can talk more since it's a part of his artist interest. I will just conclude and wrap it up. What the exhibition tried to envision is a queer labor, right? So that which is seen by us as the new social organization of bodies that could become the future social force. Future social force is supposed to value extracting productive capitalist labor, profit-driven capitalist labor, a force that possesses productive power without being consumed and depleted in the process. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Olga. Our next presentation is titled Queer Worker Portraits and Other Projects, an Artist Talk by Yevgeniy Fiks. And is it the same slides or different slides? Different slides, which are being loaded right now. Yevgeniy Fiks is a Moscow-born, New York-based artist whose work explores the dialectic between communism and the West. And as soon as we go... There we go.
Thank you so much. I think I will. Great, thank you. Thank you so much. It's great to be here. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. I will start by showing, I selected a total of 3 projects to share with you. And I will start with a project that was in the exhibition that Olga just talked about. The project that I showed called Toward a Portfolio of Woodcuts, and it's dedicated to Harry Hay. I'm mostly a conceptual artist. I sometimes curate, and the history of the American Communist movement is one of my interests, and the history of LGBTQ communities is my another interest, and Yiddish culture is my third interest. This particular project addresses both the history of the communist movement and the history of gay and lesbian movement. So the project is from more than 10 years ago. So I was very interested in the figure of Harry Hay, first because in early 2000 I've done a few projects about the history of the communist movement in the US, and then I started also doing projects on the gay and lesbian history in the United States and also in the former Soviet Union. And Harry Hay became this very key figure that bridged, in my research, the history of communism in the US and the history of liberation of non-normative sexuality and gender. So I learned that in Harry Hay's archive, there are a couple of woodcuts that he produced in the 1940s. So he was a communist activist. He was part of the American Communist Party in 1930s and 1940s. And then in late 40s, early 50s, he left the communist movement and became one of the founders of the Matashin Society. And he was no longer a member of the Communist Party, but he considered himself a Marxist till the day he died. So in this project, it's a series of works on wood. So I would use wood blocks that would normally used for woodcuts, and I would scrape text. And the text comes from Harry Hay memoirs, from things that he said, things that he wrote. So this particular, it's a little hard to read because it is, so it's produced, it's very hard to read. I think I'll have to go a little bit back. In not being able to find a flower-faced boy who was a Marxist like me, who would stand with me in the class struggle against oppression.
Good quote.
Yes. Newer levels of Marxist perspective which were emerging in me as gay values. Wouldn't be wonderful if we lived in the Soviet Union and could do this every day? With my communist background, I knew I could not work in a group without a theory. I said, all right, Harry, what is our theory? And he said, we are an oppressed minority culture. I agreed instantly. Are you now, or have you ever been a communist?
Yes.
recognizing gays as a separate people whose time has come, a people who must not be blackmailed into silence by the left. So this project, yes, unfortunately it's very hard to read. I didn't realize it would be so hard to read. I guess it's the contrast also of the screen. But so the quotations bridged to me the transition, I guess, of Harry Hayes' thinking from communism to gay liberation, and how he bridged it on his terms. And so it creates an interesting kind of, I guess, juxtaposition of two identities, but it's also kind of very organic in the history of Harry Hay, the combination of his communism and gay liberation. So the next project that I will share with you is a more recent project. I actually started working on it in 2017, the same year that Olga and I were working on that exhibition in Connecticut. And it's a series of paintings. It's a series of oil paintings, and it took me a while to complete them. So overall, I guess I worked on it for 6 years. So there is a title, Queerly Classed, is one title, and it rhymes also with the title of the show that Olga spoke about. And there is another title for this project, Straightish Paintings. So I painted initially 10 LGBTQ workers, American LGBTQ workers, folks who identified as working class individuals and for whom working class identity was important, not something that is going to pass or something that they would leave behind once they join the middle class. But they identified as working class. It was important for them. And so I'm starting this presentation with a portrait that I did of Anne Ballet, who spoke yesterday as a keynote speaker here. And I visited Anne outside of Philadelphia, where Anne taught in 2017, and I took some photographs, and then I completed my portraits on photographs, based on photographs. Sometimes I paint from life, sometimes I paint from photographs, sometimes I mix the both. So this painting is about 40 by 30 inches, and it's oil on canvas. It's the whole series is oil on canvas, so I was trained as kind of as a realist painter, as a socialist realist painter, you can say, in Moscow in early 90s, late 80s. So it's important for me to once in a while practice my craft as a Soviet painter, right? And some of the projects that I make, I return to painting, and you know, I paint as I would have painted, I guess, 30 years ago. Tara Glancy is a writer, and Tara used to work at this bar, and it was important that I would paint against that with the bar in the background. It's on Houston Street, this bar. So it was important to paint it directly, you know, paint it without knowledge, without any knowledge of queer art or queer aesthetics. So, so it was supposed to, I wanted to approach it as a Soviet painter would approach it. So Brooklyn comes from a family of, from a dynasty of truck drivers in upstate New York. Three generations of truck drivers. And so I painted also a portrait of historian Miriam Frank, who is probably familiar a lot for people at this conference. Miriam's book is in the bookstore downstairs, History of Queerness in the Labor Movement. So the book you can see on the shelf. And I will conclude my presentation with a project called Soviet Union, July 1991. So the first project that I shared with you was devoted to Harry Hay, and Harry Hay also figures in this project called Soviet Union, July 1991. This project is a series of paintings painted from video stills of a documentary footage shot in Moscow and Leningrad in July 1991 at the first, again, lesbian conference that took place in the late Soviet Union in July 1991, and Harry Hay and his partner were at this conference. So you will see a couple of images of Harry Hay here in the middle, kind of wearing a hat and glasses at a train station in Leningrad, now St. Petersburg. So this was Harry Hay's first and only trip to the Soviet Union. It was July 1991. And you will see him in a few images of this series of about 35 paintings. So this is Harry Hay and his partner John Burns, I think. This is in the Red Square. This is also outside of Kremlin. Also outside of Kremlin. Inside the Kremlin. And in the Red Square. Also in the Red Square. So it was an interesting occasion because so it was 1991, July, and in a couple of weeks the Soviet Union would fall. And here you have a former member of the American Communist Party, one of the founders of the, again, lesbian movement in the US, who still considered himself Marxist at that time, visits the Soviet Union, right before its fall. And in this particular slide, he is in the same space with the first openly gay Soviet citizen, Roman Kalinin, who was in his early 20s, and their ideology completely do not align. So Harry Hay still talks about, communism, and Roman Kalinin believes that capitalism is the only answer to gay liberation in the Soviet Union. And it's also interesting that capitalism is represented by someone so young, and communism is represented by someone who was 79 at the time. Harry Hay was 79.
And were you there with them?
I was not. I was still in Moscow, but I only got this footage maybe 15 years ago, and me doing this project is kind of trying to come to terms with that history. So Harry Hay will not appear in the rest of the images, but I just would like you to very quickly get a sense of what was happening in this footage, what was happening in July 1991 in Moscow. It says democracy and Article 121, which was an anti-gay law in the Soviet Union, are incompatible. While we are united, we cannot be defeated. So here you have Roman Kalinin, this pro-capitalist Russian gay activist, addresses the attendees. Let me love men, do not stand in my way. Sexual minorities. It's different scenes from that conference. Together we will fight HIV/AIDS. No to Article 121. Lesbians of Russia, let's fight for love without AIDS. So the stage. Okay, this is the last slide. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yevgeniy. Our third and final presentation on this panel is titled Judith Waterman, Art and Lesbian-Class Relations. We have two presenters for this last presentation. Irena Klepfisz is a lesbian poet, essayist, translator, activist, and a practicing secular Jew. And Ariel Goldberg is a writer, curator, and editor. Are you two going to sit at the table? Yes. Perfect.
Can I hold it? Because I want to watch what he's flashing.
Oh, sure. Do you want to hold the?
Well, I can sit, I can get up and.
Hello.
Okay. Hello? Can you hear me? Okay.
And which one is this? Is it that one? Okay, good. I'm just going.
That's yours, I think.
I was just thinking.
Thank you. It's funny, I almost want to sit.
Do you want to sit here and we want me
No,
to sit?
I'm gonna. We're gonna figure this out, aren't we?
We have to figure out how to share the space. Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
So I'm Ariel. Hi, everybody. Welcome, welcome. Is it too hard for you to see if you sit?
No, I'm fine.
Do you want to pull up a chair over there?
No, I'm okay when I sit down. I'll sit when I have to.
All right. So we have a sort of talk show bit that we do. It's a little bit, if we can sit down if we get tired, but the
Yeah.
goal is that we can see the screen here. Okay, so I have been working with Irena on learning about and understanding the work of her late partner, Judith Waterman. That Irena and we're gonna talk a little bit about Judy's work, and hopefully you'll leave here today with a really great sense, and we can generate conversation about all these amazing themes. Thank you both for your presentations. So we have about 30 slides to go through. We'll see how that pans out. Judith Waterman started making work in the 1960s, also working mostly in painting and works on paper, mixed media works on paper. And her early work is really quite experimental. There's a lot of looseness with form. This is an early self-portrait. I'm going to be moving through as much of the images. Well, maybe we can switch spots so I'm a little closer here to there we go. So we have a sort of psychedelic and science fiction-y vibe in these early works. And then things get, this is an early exhibition, well, an installation of Judy's early work that almost looks like intestinal tunnels and in the incredible Magic Gardens in Philadelphia, friends of Judy's. And early work then began to transition into architectural studies. These are slides of South Carolina barns. And we're getting closer to the point where structures of spaces became Judy's preoccupation. And this work was recently exhibited. These almost look like cold concrete buildings or mausoleums of sorts. So we're going into the early 70s here, and these were recently remounted in the 13 Women Artists Show at the Zucher Gallery, which was really exciting. It was the first time that Judy's work was re-exhibited in many, many years, dozens of years. And Judith Waterman is here in this photograph that advertised 13 Women Artists. This exhibition was just remounted. And Judy, where's Judy, Irena?
She's in the back. She's the top on the left. The left person smiling on the left.
All right. And so Irena and I, to bring you into the conversation, you met Judy in 1976, right?
Well, we had an interesting meeting because in 1976, I'm a poet, I'm a writer, I'm a totally fish out of water among all of you people. I really am not very knowledgeable about art and the art world. But I won a CAPS grant in poetry in 1976, and I bumped into a couple of friends, and I was very excited, and I said, I just won a CAPS grant. I won $7,000. And they said, oh, we know someone who won a CAPS grant in painting. She's hanging a show, do you want to see it? So I went, I said, okay, and that's how I met Judy. Judy had won a CAPS grant that year. Unfortunately, I had just moved in with someone, so things were a little complicated for a couple of years, or a year and a half, and then eventually we started living together in 1979 in a loft in Brooklyn, downtown Brooklyn, and we're still there. I'm still there.
But
you're
there with a lot of Judy's work.
And I'm there with a lot of Judy's work, which you can see began to change from the very early work and had much more architectural structures and so on.
Let's hear the poem. What was it like to be living with a painter working in such large scale?
Well, she was as much of a pain in the ass as I was, so I think we met our match, but it wasn't always easy.
Should we do a poem for Judy, Irena? Okay.
One of the biggest problems was, of course, earning a living. So this is a poem I wrote. It's a rather brief poem about Judy beginning her new job. I will keep this simple, not give it universal significance, nor transform it into art. You say, I will not do this forever. I will paint. I've learned now that it's no solace to point out that others, so many others, straining, wasting, unable to do what they know they must do. For such loss is always solitary and unshared, outside the scope of bloodless theory. You do not paint, and what must happen does not happen. The transformation on the empty canvas of the elusive marble into the shadowy water, or the simple water into impenetrable rock. And nothing, nothing, not even a loving embrace, nor special, intimate midnight talk will ever make up or diminish that loss for you, or for her, or her, or her.
Beautiful.
I think that was Judy's major problem in life, was trying to figure out how she could paint and how she could support herself. And we spent an enormous amount of time. One of the things, this is some of the size of Judy's paintings. They were like, this one is probably about 8 by 11. But there are paintings that are 11 by 14 feet. I mean, they're enormous, and she handled them by herself. When my friend Gabby von Seltman, who's here, who's helping me make inventory of her work, we had to have 5 people come to help try to do this, whereas she manipulated the paintings herself. I mean, she was extremely strong. And that was in 2020. This was a statement that I found that she made about the issue of size. The size of this painting is not unusual for the 1960s. The scale of this work and other work of that period was critical to my work process. I worked in an apartment at Times Square. My studio space was exactly 12 feet wide, and my paintings at 11 feet allowed just enough space to turn them around and upside down. Over long periods of time, I worked on pieces upside down. There was a sense of tension with the physical space of the studio that I could not have with smaller work. My vision was totally engaged by the work which filled the room. There was a sense of being in the painting, since it dominated even my peripheral vision. Part of the time, I looked at the painting through a reducing lens. I should emphasize that the scale of the work in relationship to the space of the studio represented my resistance to limitations imposed from without. And it's a really major, I mean, to me, this was kind of Judy, in a pose of constant resistance, and sort of, she was in kind of challenge mode. She dared anybody else to kind of challenge her in some way. So, and these were, maybe we should talk about the early 70s and Socarides and
well, that's where we're going. So one of the challenges that Judith Waterman, or Judy, as I feel like it's appropriate to call her in your presence, faced was just time, money, very familiar struggles for artists, but especially in the 1970s, I think everybody here is probably in tune with the extreme environment of homophobia, especially in the psychiatric professions. And one of the things that biographically is important to know about Judith Waterman is that her partner before Irena was a patient of Charles Socarides. And if you're not familiar with Socarides and his footprint on the psychiatric world, there's a great documentary film called Cured that will give insight to this. But Irena made a really big discovery after Judy passed, 2014, after 2014, in her archives with a series of paintings that we're going to show you now.
Yeah, but I think, let me just add to that the issue with Socarides was that her partner was his patient, and her partner committed suicide. And she had always talked to me about this, and she completely blamed Socarides for her partner's death. And so that was one thing that happened in 1971, 72. And when her partner committed suicide, she left the city. And she went upstate and while she was upstate, the next thing that changed her life was that she was diagnosed with breast cancer, and she had to have surgery, and she had to deal with her medical condition. So there's this period where she did these kind of, she never titled her paintings, but the paintings that she did during this period are mostly titled. Now this is the paintings, this is called Self-Portrait. It was done in 1973 after her diagnosis. The Socarides painting, which she had talked about Socarides, but she never told me that she had done this painting. This is the painting of Socarides. I mean, it's sort of, when you see it, it's enormous. This one is 11 by 14. I mean, it's really enormous, and it's very difficult to see completely the details. There was a lot of rage and anger at the same time. There's that. And then what about the inner wall and outer wall? Do we have that? Yeah, that's the inner wall. It's not shadowed, yeah. This was all done in a space of 4 or 5 years. And it clearly was an issue of homophobia, gay. I mean, Socarides was the leading doctor in the Psychiatric Association against the normalization and the removal of homosexuality as a mental disorder. He was the lead doctor in that. He championed that. He resisted it. He was very well known. His son, if you watch Cured, his son was gay. He had 4 children. He had one son who was gay, who became an advisor to Clinton on gay issues. So his son is quite open. He's in the film Cured about the whole issue about his father and what happened with that. So I think it's interesting because I think aside from these things, she was an abstract painter, and I'd love to hear from other people about how gay artists express their gayness in abstract art and how we approach that and how we analyze that. Because Judy's work, I would have said, aside from the paintings that you just saw, oh yeah, those were the J's, folks.
Right, the Socarides sticks out for its representation. It's a very direct representation of him, and also going through that period of breast cancer. And this is a view into about 4 or 5 years into you knowing each other, just about finally moving in together, on the New York City subway when there was more art on the subway, one could say. And just to move along, just so we see some more work.
This was another project that Judy and I thought, we were constantly thinking about how she could make money, how we could make money. So we were going to do a children's book about Soros and Naches. I mean, those people anybody that knows Yiddish, it's the good ones and the bad ones. And she was going to do the paintings, I was going to do the poems. That sort of never got off the ground. I mean,
you pitched it, right?
We pitched it to one editor, and it was stupid because we should have continued, but she rejected it. But I have the whole poem, and Judy has about 4 paintings.
But you did collaborate in other ways and continue to collaborate. I think we were talking about your life collaboration, but you've used a lot of Judy's work on the covers of your recent books. So we have that interior-exterior wall. And this is translated into Polish.
Right. I mean, I think one of the things that I have had trouble with was I think Judy had a very, very hard time, and we should read this statement from Naifa, with being gay in the art world. Now, she was very much with me in my lesbian and gay queer literary world. She was very comfortable with it, totally out and so on. I think it was very different for her in the art world. Now, when I first came out in 1973, I came out when I was 32, and I think within a year or so, I think I lost every single straight friend I had. Not from overt homophobia, but just kind of, I don't know what.
Lack of shared interests?
Whatever. And And it was interesting. I mean, I was not philosophically a lesbian separatist, but I was living a lesbian separatist life. That's what but she had a really, the same thing happened to her in a slow way. She had a lot of contacts, knew a lot of artists, and she lost touch with all of them. They were all straight. It was unclear. I think she was in that 13 Women Artists show. I think she was the only lesbian. And nobody else I found out, I think one of the things that I discovered, which I don't know, I didn't actually know about this, she applied for a grant from NIFA. And this is very, I think, telling about Judy's feelings. A critical issue for gay artists is the dilemma of having to market themselves and their work in a conventionally straight art community. Often this work is done socially, and gay artists often exclude themselves or find themselves excluded from the larger community. Part of the function that these workshops might serve is to put gay artists into contact with each other, to provide supportive audiences for gay imagery and art, to identify resources for gay artists to network. I mean, the loneliness of that is just painful to read. And I think that's what she felt. Now, I know that there were other abstract artists. I mean, Harmony Hammond, for example, I was involved with Conditions magazine, and we had her on the cover. But she somehow, I don't know what happened, but she somehow was unable to do it. And there was some inhibition there. And I think it was a hardship. She continued working. I mean, she did show, but eventually...
Yeah, let's see. So just, we only have a few more minutes before we go into our group conversation. So just to show some of the ways that Judith Waterman's work was exhibited, it was from a much more formalist, painter, large format painting perspective. It wasn't, there were women artists show, like 13 women artists, or we have Berkshire women artists. So it wasn't, there, the art world is usually about 50 years behind, give or take. That's a generous estimation. But, when there was all this lesbian feminist activity going on, there were, in the 80s, exhibitions about women artists to combat just the patriarchal tendencies within exhibition spaces. But there was more theoretical, conceptual frameworks around Judy's work, like an essay on the large painting or surfaces. And actually, a lot of Judy's later works on paper that were smaller than, because after her surgeries and the lymph node removal in her arms, she was working at a much smaller scale. Surfaces was a major preoccupation. So just to show you a little more of this work, and we had one final section of a poem to read to just bring this back to the tension, I think, between like labor, money, time, energy with painting, a painting practice that was very much about, time. It was very time consuming. She would work on a painting for years, and these works on paper moved a little quicker because of the smaller scale. Irena, I'm gonna pull this up on the screen too if you wanna read it here.
This is part of a long
A little,
poem.
Mike.
This is part of a long section of a poem I wrote about Judy's biography, and it's about the jobs that she had during her life trying to support herself. And I called the section "The Artist at Work." You were a probation officer and caseworker, a recreational leader, arts and crafts counselor, an evening clerk in the picture department of the 42nd Street Library, an extra on CBS, The Secret Storm and Love of Life, an artist for CETA, creating public murals and leading art workshops for seniors, an organizer banding together our building tenants to get a designated rent stabilized, a word processor in a law office, an adjunct art instructor at Fairleigh Dickinson, North Adams, and Russell Sage, a transcriber of taped reports, an adjunct women's studies and art instructor for an external adult degree program, a companion to the sister of Edna St. Vincent Millay, an instructor of evening ESL and GED classes for union members, an active member of the local AFL-CIO chapter and negotiating committee. You were 74 when the health issues forced you to stop working. since there never had been any benefits, there was no pension. So.
I think that's a good place to pause and go into questions. Thanks for readings and all your attention.
Let's have the four of you sit up by the table.
Do you want to be clicking?
She'll take care of that. To get us started, I have a question that goes for each of you, which is, as each of you were talking, I was thinking about the scale of the work. And so I wanted to ask you to comment on the scale of the work. How many pieces of art were in the exhibition? You all talked about the scale, the size of individual pieces, but could you talk about, for Ariel and Irena, talk about how many pieces of Judith's work exist in the world? And then if you could also talk about I was interested, the scale, the size of the Harry Hay etchings, but also if you want to talk about other scale stuff.
Judy, the canvases, there are about 70 canvases, approximately 70, maybe a little more. There are some that are rolled up that we haven't really seen, so maybe it's about 75. Some of the very early work is much smaller. The larger work, there must be about 40 or 30 of them, are very heavy, very large. The canvas is much stronger. The stretchers are heavier and larger. And that on paper, when she finally started exclusively working, there's over 400 pieces. Those are very manageable, luckily.
Thank you.
Well, in the exhibition I described, there were, I think I showed you probably 11 artists, and there were maybe 5 more that I didn't mention, but there were works of various sizes. It was not about scale, it was more about format. So some works takes space, especially in the second iteration of the show. We had a bigger gallery. We added more works. There was a big installation by a Dutch artist worker that was a life-size installation, supposedly representing, I'm stuffed up, representing the private, very intimate booth with the red light where people could read the brochure about workers and gay man representations. So that was kind of intimate content that required the intimate environment, so that we try to imitate this intimacy of the experience of work, watching this installation. And there was also intimate videos that had some pornographic elements. We also tried to, not because there were restrictions, no, there was no restrictions in the gallery space, but there was a pornographic content, so that also kind of we try to imitate their intimate environment there. And somewhere like in out there open, so that like fall of communism based on Eastern European pornographic image, so that was viewed openly, and it also required a lot of space. We because artists wanted to have a projection, we couldn't put it on the video monitor, because artists actually wanted to have it more monumental. And we also had quotations from the gay chats that Yevgeniy came up with, selection of these quotations from there, so that we had them across the rooms, like placed directly on the walls. Vinyl, yeah. So that was also something that was framing entire exhibition. So the economy of this exhibition, I would say, was like pretty monumental, I would say, so that we didn't really economize the space.
So the project, the Harry Hay project with woodcuts. So each image, each work is of a regular poster size, 18 by 24. So they are not really monumental, and of course they were so huge on the screen, but they are quite kind of regular poster size. And the portraits of queer workers of various sizes. There are some are 30 by 40 inches, and the larger ones are 48 by 36 inches, but none of them is really monumental. So actually, I didn't want to paint them monumental, right? They're little, maybe human size, maybe a little bit larger, but not truly monumental.
Thank you very much. This has been an absolutely incredible session. I just wanted to ask a little bit about the time that we're in now and the idea of the sort of collateral, the loss that there has been through the prevailing periods that we're talking about in Judy's lifespan, where class, the prevailing politics, the geopolitical things that we've heard about, the structural racism and so on, have limited the visibility and the possibility of artists meeting the public, their work meeting the public. So we've had this suppression of work over the period that we're talking about. But now we understand that there's a reclamation of these works, that there is a possibility. I mean, you've spoken a little bit about the 13 artists show and so on. But this is happening in capitalism. So there is we know that capitalism, that there's a finite amount of works by dead artists to monetize, and that there is an industry here that is involved in these reclamations and showing of artists. So I can see the way that Judy's work, for example, could become something different now because of the interest that there now is in queer work and so on. I'm mentioning this because it's a global phenomenon. There is, for example, the Women in Revolt exhibition in the Tate, and these types of shows that are representing work. Now, having spoken to, for example, a lot of lesbian and feminist and other artists who are involved in Women in Revolt, I was partially involved in that show, there are griefs there. This is not about artists who, having lived to 70, 80 or whatever, who are now only just being shown that they're like, oh great, fantastic, are now being shown. So I just wondered a little bit about your thoughts. I really love the way that you talk about taking care around the ways that these works are shown and so on and so forth, but what can we do to think about these issues of extraction to a degree, tokenism, the fashionability, and so on. How can we honour the labour and also the griefs, the rage, the other feelings that we might have about these works now meeting the public, sometimes when the artists have died without that recognition. I'm sorry that's a long thing, but it just feels as though we're at a moment now where we need to be thinking about this, not just feeling like happy that we're seeing the work.
I'm happy to just respond to that. I think it's such an important question, and I would say, as somebody who, I have a background actually in poetry and essay writing, and then I was doing curatorial work for experimental and queer literary communities here in the New York City area and also the Bay Area. And I actually turned to curating from a very charged perspective of trying to communicate the context of, for example, the Socarides work. Like, you know, that needs to be there. And my conviction and working with Irena in this is that, you know, we can armor work from being sort of co-opted, and especially, you know, artists that need just the resources. It's like, how can we take the money and run to preserve the work, and then work with curators and institutions that get it and are not extractive, because there's choices that people can make about which curators and institutions they work with, and also they can set the terms for how the work is discussed. And I think one important aspect, and just speaking from someone that's done curatorial work, this is research and a labor of our relationship that's grown from this, and Julie introduced us, but I think your exhibition is also armoring. Every work has a criticality to it. Every work is refusing to take out the narratives of capitalism, or even the weird trajectory of Harry Hay, where it was, you know, very communist, and then Mattachine on the surface looked like a very, you know, what we would say now, like a sort of liberal NGO, non-profit-y, you know, more on the not left radical side. So the contradictions within, yes, women in art, like I think Jeb was another artist that I do a lot of work with, Joan Byron has to navigate this a lot. And, you know, how do you get invited into the Museum of Modern Art or the Tate when you've actually been excluded from it, like Judy was, for, you know, their whole lives? And it's amazing that Irena and Jeb are here to narrate it, and I think it's very much about being in conversation with the people who are not going to take away the reality, the material realities of their lives. And I would love to take some Art World money to get all of Judith Waterman's work in temperature-controlled storage, so that when people are waking up to the power of it, it's at least in good, secure condition, and it's not like Irena, you know, with a drill taking it out of the chair. You know, like the house needs to be taken apart, actually, like, you know, to get a lot of this work out, like with the Rose, which is Jay Defoe's work in San Francisco. Some people might know it. It's about this thick. She just kept painting over and over the Rose, and they had to cut out a piece of the apartment wall in San Francisco to get the art out. So, you know, it is very physical and literal around this. So, yeah.
I'm straight, I'm not queer, so I can't really speak for queer, how they feel now about, you know, being included, and at the same time, not everything is understood about queer identity, you know, by the larger audiences, and especially in commercialized art world. But I can only say that this you know, history of inclusion is also very long and very painful, and it's still an open question on what condition, what terms, you know, they are the queer artists and queer identity is included in the mainstream. Like I mentioned, just observing the Whitney Biennial over the years here, you can say that this is a very limited condition. Yes, AIDS, HIV-infected artists, and is the, you know, theme that we are talking about openly, and we are welcoming these experiences, the stories about that we are welcoming. But what about artists, queer artists with cancer, with breast cancer, right? What about other angles and other experiences and, you know, of this, you know, of this kind of years of marginalization, how marginalized you have to be in order to be included, so that these are all questions that should be asked, right? So, and I think that it's still a lot of limitations here. It's my observation.
Well, I think I was very kind of taken by the slide that was in your presentation, the quote from the knife application, because it definitely felt like a different time, different world, right? So certainly, gay and lesbian artists in 1980s felt, so excluded from the art world. And certainly, I don't see this anymore in New York art world, right? But the question is, what's to do with artists from the 80s and the 70s, right? So yeah, so I think I'll need to think about it. Yeah, yeah.
I see. Now we have 3 questions, and we are at the end of our time. But what I'm going to do is just let each of you ask your questions so that we leave with lots of questions and lots of thought to move on from. So, P, just state your question.
My question is, I'm a black lesbian, hands down, right? And coming up during this time that you're talking about right now, it's really slapping me in the face. I was very young at the time, right? And so now I'm here and recovering from stroke and a lot of other things. But my question is that how do we as black lesbians, not queer, so I had to change one of cover my books to being queer, right? As black lesbians, how do we, because I'm a filmmaker, I'm a writer, but where I made my money was working for NBC as a news video, right? And so the question is, how are black lesbians at this time, right now, coming out of the 2000s, having to have to write our work? Where do we write that work when we're in the transition of trans and queer, and I don't see the titles of lesbian?
Thank you. Question. Yeah, just say.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody, for your talk. This question is for Yevgeniy Fiks. I don't know if I said your name correctly.
Correct.
Your work is amazing, and when you were introducing the queer portrait series, I believe it was the one where a person was leaning against what seemed to be in a kitchen, like a whatever that's called, that edge, like a ledge on in the kitchen, and you introduced it saying it was very important for you to make this work without sort of knowledge of queer aesthetics, but that as a painter, from the position of a painter or with those concerns. And I guess I wonder then, like, other than what I imagine, which would be like formal concerns, like, I would love to hear you talk about what those concerns were, and at what point, like, were those concerns at odds with your knowledge of queer aesthetics at some point, right? And how would that turn up in the work?
Great, thank you. And we're 2 minutes over. The next panel's here. Alexandra, will you give us your question in 10 words or less?
Yeah, I was just hoping to ask Irena and Ariel to elaborate a little bit about how in the lesbian 70s and 80s, let's call them, the visual arts and literary communities were overlapping, because I feel like right now it's like such a, kind of, the line is blurry, I would say, and I was like hoping to hear more about it in the past, but I know we're over time.
Excellent. Thank you all.
I just want to say I have a few catalogs of Judy's work, and for anybody that wants to have a copy.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, thank you. Yeah.